Hey, I'm Jeff and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the care and propagation of the Philodendron Mayoi or Mayoi, however you decide to pronounce it. And I also recently propagated this, so I do have some propagations to show you guys as well. Now the funny thing is I actually bought this as the Philodendron Tahiti. Now in doing some research and trying to find out if it's actually a different plant or if they are the same, the results are kind of inconclusive. I have read some things saying that they are different and that they are the same. Now, one of the characteristic features of the Mayoi or the Mayoi is that the petiole has a little bit of red tinge to it. So I do believe this is the Mayoi. I think another name for this plant is Tahiti. So I'm going to treat it as the same. Yeah, these are such a beautiful plant. They have these very definitive lobes on the leaves. I don't know why I say lobes like that. It's impossible to say lobes properly. So yeah, I have a bunch of information to share with you guys, so let's get started. For all houseplants, light is probably the most important thing, and I have my plant just behind me here on the floor underneath a grow light. This is the Mother Plant Spectrum 32 grow light, so it gets a lot of nice top-down light. The plants on the floor here seem to really like that setup. Now, whether you have it in natural sunlight or underneath grow lights, you just want to make sure that it gets kind of that medium light range or that indirect light, and I'll explain a little bit more about that here in a second just to determine how much light your plant is actually getting. But just like most philodendrons, I would not suggest putting this in direct sun, otherwise it'll probably burn the leaves. However, I have read that these Mayois can actually tolerate a little bit more light than most philodendrons and even some direct sunlight. Although I wouldn't suggest that, it's probably highly specific to a certain region. Like I wouldn't be throwing mine out in the harsh south sun of the Canadian prairie summer. It will literally scorch the leaves. I think a couple hours of morning direct sunlight should be okay for the plant, but you just want to avoid the harsh kind of mid-afternoon to late afternoon sunlight, as that will probably cause some leaf burn and your plant won't look good anymore. The thing I really like about grow lights in particular is that it provides a consistent light source. I have all of mine on timers for about 14 hours a day, and the way I determine the amount of light my plants get is from a digital light meter. Now, although this doesn't tell you exactly how much light your plant is actually receiving, this is just a rough estimate of the amount of visible light that is projected onto your plants. I like to use the foot candle setting, and the medium light is in the ranges of between 250 to 500, kind of even up to that 750 range. So you can see down here, it's actually getting low light. Low light is between 50 and 250. Medium is 250 and above. So down here, it's receiving low light. But as you come up, you can see the foot candles start to increase. So the closer a grow light is to a plant, the more light that it is going to receive. So right now, it's about 2 feet from the grow light itself, and it's doing very well in that low light area. So yeah, it just goes to show you that plants are fairly resilient. I know this big anthurium leaf has kind of blocked out a lot of the light that it has been getting. So I'm just going to move this out of the way a little bit and see if that changes. So I just got that big giant leaf out of the way. I just tucked it over there for a moment. So you can see it's about 30 or 40 foot candles higher with that big giant leaf out of the way. So it's getting that medium, that lower end of medium light. And like I said, it seems to really like this location. This plant is pretty easy for watering, and it's actually quite forgiving. I probably let it get drier than I should. Right now it's on a moss pole, and the moss itself is pretty dry. It's not crispy dry, but it definitely needs to be watered. I do have it in a fairly chunky mix here, which I'll talk about shortly as well. But overall, it's not a fussy plant. You can let it get pretty dry, and it's not going to get crispy leaves, or it's not going to get really droopy or anything like that. But I would not suggest letting it get dry for too long. One of the things that I've corrected recently for my watering is testing the pH of the water. So I got this little pH testing kit, and I found out that my water was actually quite alkaline. If you have water that is too acidic or too alkaline, it makes the nutrients or the fertilizer in your soil unavailable to the plants, to the roots. So I use a combination of 2 products in my water, which I'll talk about here in a second. But when you do the initial pH test, There's a little testing solution which it has a little reference chart on the back, so whichever color your water changes to, then you can just reference it on the back and you can make an adjustment or the appropriate adjustment. Now, the one thing that I would suggest is adding fertilizer first to your water, then testing it again. A lot of fertilizers are a little bit on the acidic side, so it will lower the pH of your water. I did have someone recently say that when they added fertilizer, their pH of their water and fertilizer actually dropped to a pH of 4, so it was quite acidic. So they actually had to get a pH up, which raises the pH to the appropriate levels. So most houseplants need a pH of between 6 and 7, so you want it in kind of that yellow, almost like a greenish yellow range. That is the optimal range for houseplants to utilize those fertilizers or those nutrients. pH in your soil and water is very important. I haven't actually done any soil pH testing. I've just been correcting my water with pretty crazy results. Like I've been getting much larger, healthier leaves. Everything's been coming out undamaged, specifically with my anthuriums and philodendrons. So here's another large leaf, and then my SP Silver Columbia down here. It's sized up quite dramatically. So I've been seeing really good results with just changing the pH in my water. The frequency of watering is going to depend on your environment, so your conditions will probably be much different than mine. I live on the Canadian prairies. Right now in the summer, my indoor humidity is 55% and the temperature is 22 degrees. If you live in a very humid location, you're probably not going to have to water it as frequently as I would. In the winter, our indoor humidity can get between maybe like 20–35%, so it gets quite dry. This plant is going to dry out much faster than if it was in a higher humid location. Now for this one, in my conditions, I probably water it once a week. I try not to let the moss get like crispy dry. Right now it's dry and the soil is dry as well. The pot's pretty light, so I'm going to water it with my pH down and fertilizer solution. Now this saucer is not the saucer that it sits in. I'm just using this for water runoff collection purposes. I like to water my moss poles with my pump action garden sprayer here. I know there's different methods of watering a moss pole. I know some people like to put a water bottle on top and just let it slowly drip down. This is a fairly small moss pole. It's nothing huge where I gotta spend a lot of time watering it. So I like to just place the wand or the nozzle just at the top of the moss, and then I like to just slowly spray in the fertilizer, water mixture, and then just let it drip down from the moss into the soil. It's nice too using these clear moss poles because you can actually see the moisture level in the moss. So I'm just going to spray that until the moss is saturated, and then I'm going to let it kind of drip down into the soil. You can see it's dripping out the bottom of the drain hole there. I'll just flip it around. Looks like it's almost completely saturated, and just look at these aerial roots on the back of the plant. So the plan is, as the plant continues to grow up the moss pole and it reaches the top here, I'm going to add an extension piece. I'm going to let it continue to grow up into the extension piece, and then I can eventually do the chop and prop. So I will cut the top piece off. I'll just take the extension piece off, put it back in the pot, and then just let it continue to grow up the moss pole again. That way it can size up and get these more mature leaves. As you can see, there's quite a difference from this leaf in regards to the definitive lobes here compared to this one, and same with this one here as well. I don't want to touch this one because it's still sizing up, and I already tore the top off here. I was actually quite upset with myself. I was moving my Philodendron Splendid at the back there, and I must have accidentally pinched it because I snipped off the top, and I was not happy after that, just because this leaf is still sizing up and it's just absolutely beautiful. For soil, you don't really need anything crazy. This is a combination of ProMix's tropical plant mix and their orchid bark. So there's just some orchid chunks in there. I do put a little bit of extra perlite as well. In the orchid bark mix, there is charcoal and stuff like that. So something like this is okay. It's a nice, airy, chunky mixture. It's nothing crazy or expensive. The only soil I would suggest not putting this philodendron in is just a regular potting mix, as those are fairly peat-based. It's a pretty moisture retentive soil. You just want something that holds on to moisture, but it doesn't sit too soggy for too long, and it basically just flows out the bottom. Recently, I've been trialing this VeryPlants aeroid mix, and it's actually quite a nice mixture. It can be expensive, and it is pre-mixed, but this is what I have the plant in right now. So it's just a lot of orchid bark. The ingredients is on the back, but this is a nice mixture if you don't want to mix it yourself. It's a very fast draining soil. It holds on to moisture, but not long enough where you're going to get into those root rot situations. So yeah, if this is all you have, this is perfect. So the last thing I'm going to talk about in regards to care is the humidity, which I've kind of already talked about, as well as the fertilizer. Most philodendrons, they can tolerate regular house humidity, so anywhere between kind of that 30 to like 40, 50 range, unless you live in a very humid tropical location. Obviously, they will do much better if the humidity is high, but if it gets more than, I think 60% in your home, then you can run into mold and those types of issues. So having a fan or some sort of air circulation in your home will help with those higher humidity, moisture levels, just so you don't develop mold. So yeah. All of my philodendrons, they can grow in like 30%, no problem. Like I said, throughout the winter months, it gets really dry here, so I do supplement it with some humidifiers downstairs here, just so the air is not too dry. So how often you fertilize is really dependent on you. For me, just because I have so many houseplants throughout my house, not only in the basement here, it's almost impossible for me to remember exactly when I last gave fertilizer. So it's just easier for me to add a very small amount with each watering. I don't want to double dose on one plant and not give fertilizer to another, so that's the way I do it. Now for you, if you have a manageable amount of plants, then maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month, you can half dose that, or you can obviously just follow the directions on the back. The nice thing with the Dynagrow Foliage Pro is it does have kind of a diluted maintenance dose, and they also have a production dose. And then if you do hydroponics, it does have a hydroponic dosing as well. So if you grow plants in strictly water, this is a suitable fertilizer for you and your houseplants. So really, it depends what you want to do. Now the numbers on the bottle are important as well. These 936 is what the Dynagrow Foliage Pro is, and that is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen helps with the development of leaves. It helps with chlorophyll. The middle number 3, these are all percentages, by the way, so this is 9%. Nitrogen, phosphorus is 3%. Phosphorus is mainly used for plants that flower. So if you want more flowers, then you will probably want a phosphorus number that is a little bit higher than the nitrogen. And potassium, just a really basic kind of overview, is just to help with the development of roots. So yeah, my plants really like this. I like that it is a liquid solution. I just dilute it or dump it in a canister of water and mix it up, and it's really easy. I do have these, I believe, on my Amazon US and Canada, so the link is down in the description. I do have a number of other products on there as well, and everything that I have listed on my Amazon page is something that I would use or recommend for your houseplants. So yeah, I wouldn't put anything on there that I haven't tried or wouldn't use myself. Okay, finally now to propagate this plant. Like I said, about a month ago, I chopped the top off. It did have some nice aerial roots, and I basically stuck it on this moss pole, just the top section, and then I propagated single nodes, which I will show you how to do and talk about. I'm not going to chop this plant up, but I'll just kind of explain it as best as I can. I'll also leave the link to the full video itself somewhere up in the corner and in the description of this video. So what I did is I chopped in between 2 nodes. So here is a node and here's a node. Each node has a leaf, or here's the petiole, and then here's the leaf. So you want to cut in between a node like that. Now if your plant has roots like this growing on a moss pole, then you can quite literally stick it in another container of soil, put it on another moss pole. If yours is in the trailing version, or if it doesn't have a moss pole and it doesn't have any roots, then you can stick it in whatever choice or propagation method you want. These will propagate nicely in water. They'll also do very well in perlite prop boxes and also sphagnum moss prop boxes. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. So different ways that you can propagate. Now with the cuttings that I took, like I said, I took individual node cuttings. So that means that, again, here's the node, and you want to cut just above and below that. So this section right here, with one leaf and area roots, you can propagate that in a prop box or in water as well, and eventually you will get a new growth point, so an entirely new stem from this node. So here's my prop box, and this specific single node did not have any roots on it. So here's the leaf, and in the prop box it has developed its own root system, and you can see it has developed an entirely new stem from that node right here. So you won't ever get any new growth from the cut portions. So this is the initial node. Here's the leaf, here's the petiole, and here's the leaf. It's growing off one node, and then the new growth point came from the node. So this is what's called a mid-cut, and when you take a mid-cut, so you have a leaf that has some lobes, when you get a mid-cut and it starts to push out new growth, it's going to have the most juvenile leaf. So there are no lobes on this one. This is its juvenile form, and as it continues to grow and mature, then it gets the definitive lobes and, yeah, almost like a palm-like leaf. So this is what to expect after about a month in the perlite prop box, and again, it can do the exact same thing in a container of water. Now the section of the stem that was growing in the moss, I did cut those up into individual nodes as well, and they did have some roots on them, and so I planted them in a container of soil. So there was 3 nodes that had leaves and roots, and then there was 2 nodes that had roots but no leaves, and you can see, it looks like this one is getting a new leaf right here. So it's exactly the same as what it looked like in the prop box, but it's just underneath the soil. So here's the leaf. Here is the new growth point which popped out of the soil. Looks like this middle one doesn't have any growth yet. This one right here, it's getting a leaf that's just popping through the soil right now. And then it looks like one of the leafless nodes that I just buried in the soil is getting a tiny little leaf here as well. So there's 5 node or single node cuttings in this container. And again, here's a nice example of a very juvenile leaf. And as it matures, then it starts to get these lobes. So such a beautiful plant. It's pretty cool to see them grow like this as well. So yeah, I like learning off of chopping up my plants and just how they grow. So one day this leaf will be like this. I hope that all made sense, because sometimes I just get talking and rambling on and I forget what I talk about. I don't know what I'm going to do with these cuttings yet. I may end up selling them, so yeah, I don't know, maybe doing a plant trade or something like that. So if you get the opportunity to buy one of these, I highly recommend it. I don't see them in many plant stores, so although I wouldn't consider them rare, I would definitely consider them uncommon. You won't see them, or I've never seen them in big box stores, only kind of those specialty plant shops. So yeah, I think I got mine for a fairly decent price as well, like 20, 25 bucks, something like that, just in these small leaf versions. So yeah, if you can find it or if you can get your hands on it, I highly recommend it. There's some other varieties out there that are very similar to this as well that might be a little bit more common. So I'm just hitting my plants here. So I think that's going to be pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it. Thanks for all the support. Take care, everyone. Bye.